Deborah here to walk you through our next lesson of Year 7 Humanities and Week 7 of Term 2, looking at economics and looking at long-term financial goals. Before I start this lesson, I do want to stress that this video lecture and these lesson activities are designed for a double period. And I'll make that very clear in the lesson plan, but if you're looking at the video, you're looking at these slides, the textbook, and thinking, how am I going to complete this in one lesson? You're not. It's designed for a double period. I thought it was too much information to do in one lesson. It's a bit of a complex topic, so I want to give you guys as much time as possible to complete these activities. So it's entirely up to you how you want to use that double period to finish these slides and these questions. I recommend you watch the video and read through the slides and look at the textbook questions in this first half of your double, in the first period. And then you can decide, okay, I'm going to do this question this period and these questions next period. Or maybe I'll do these questions and focus on that question later on. So it's entirely up to you. I just wanted to stress before you guys get stressed that it's a double period, this video. So I do apologize if the video is a bit longer and if I lose my voice, which is already happening. So, our learning intention is to develop our understanding of long-term saving methods such as superannuation, investments, and interest. And our success criteria is to define those key terms, the big three up there, and to differentiate between short-term and long-term financial goals. So part of effectively managing our finances, part of saving money, is having short-term goals, so something that's going to be completed within a week, or within a month, or even the very next day. But also long-term goals that are completed a year from now, 6 years from now, or 60 years from now. Cool, so that's what we're looking at today. Hopefully you'll be able to tell the difference between a short-term and a long-term goal, and hopefully you'll be able to understand these three key terms here. The future, long-term financial goals. I want you guys to think about this statement here. It's never too early to start saving. The difference between a comfortable lifestyle in the future and after you retire and after you stop working versus living dollar to dollar, where you don't have enough money all the time and you're living off 2-minute noodles is effective financial management. That's why we're teaching you guys these skills early on. It's important to have short-term financial goals, so saving enough money for a new phone. It's important to have long-term financial goals as well, such as saving money for a house. To prepare for your future and retirement, you will need to understand these three key terms here that relate to long-term financial management, which are superannuation, investments, and interest. So that first term, retirement, superannuation, and age pension. A person can leave the workforce and retire when they choose. However, they will need to be able to pay for their living expenses once they are no longer earning an income. So after I retire, after I stop working, I'm not going to take another job in my life. I still have needs and wants. I still have expenses. I still have to afford goods and services. So how am I going to do that if I've lost my salary, my wages, my income? Well, in Australia, the retirement age is 60 to 65 years. So that's when most people will retire in Australia. That's when we'll stop working, is around 60 to 65 years. If you retire at this age, you are eligible to access an age pension. And what a pension is an amount of money provided to people who retire, retirees, by the government to help people afford their basic needs. So the government realized, they looked at the situation, they said, okay, once you've stopped working, it's kind of hard to afford living expenses. It's kind of hard to afford food, water, electricity, etc. So people who have retired can access a pension. So every week or every month, the government sends them a pension, which is a little bit of money to help them pay for food, water, all their needs and wants. Another form of income for people who have retired is superannuation. So in addition to earning an income, when you're working a casual job, a part-time job, a full-time job, in addition to earning your income, you also get a small percentage, a small amount. So it could be $50, $100, $5, depending on how much money you're earning. Some of your income goes into a superannuation fund. So some people call it super. This fund can only be accessed when you retire, reach the retirement age, or you have an illness or medical condition that prevents you from working again. So once I retire, I have access to a pension, And when I have been working throughout my entire life, I had people putting money into my super when I worked at Kmart, when I worked at Woolworths. Now I'm in a full-time job. I still have money going into my super account. And that money can only be accessed when I retire. So think of it as, your income, your money that you get from your job goes into your wallet, it goes into your bank account, but a small percentage of your income is going into this safe, this locked box that you can't access until you retire. And that's how we help people who retire when they leave the workforce. That's how we help them plan for long-term financial management. It's this tool that helps people afford their goods and services, their needs and wants in the future. So it's a long-term financial management goal because it's happening when you're 60, 65 years old. So, I got bad news, guys. The average price, the median house price in Australia is $800,000. Even with a very impressive budget and savings, you cut out the Maccas and the coffees, look at you, Mr. Tapley, you may not have enough money. You may have insufficient funds to purchase a house. So how do we afford these expensive expenses, like a new car or a holiday or starting a business or purchasing a house? Well, many people will take out a loan. You might have heard that term before, but for those of you who have not, a loan is money that has been borrowed. So a bank will lend you out a sum of money, whether that's $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, that you will then repay over time. So let's say I want to buy a new car, but I don't have enough money. I'll go to the bank and say, can I get a loan for $10,000? They say, sure. And they give me the money. I use that money to buy the car, meet my needs and wants, my goods and services, etc. And then over the next 5 years, 10 years, however many years, I pay the bank $10 a month or $100 a month or $1,000 a month, and then I repay that loan. So it's borrowed money, but I do have to pay it back. It's not free money, though. I should stress that. You can't walk into the bank after school and be like, oh, I need some KFC. I'm going to go get a loan. You have to pay the money back you borrowed, obviously, but you also have to pay interest. Interest is an additional payment, usually calculated as a percentage. So, for example, if I borrow $100,000 from a bank, they may offer you the loan, so they're going to offer me the $100,000, but I also have 5% interest, which means I have to repay the $100,000 plus 5% extra. So that could be $100,000 plus 5%, or they might charge me interest on how much money I have to repay. So it kind of makes you want to pay that money faster. Because if I say I've got a loan for $1,000, I'll pay that back 50 years from now. But if they say, well, actually, Mr. Tapley, every month that you don't repay that money, your loan, your interest goes up 5%, that's going to encourage me to pay it back quicker. So a loan is basically how people can afford these big long-term expenses, but you have to watch out for that interest. That's how they get you. The final big term we'll be looking at is investments. So investments and shares. There is also the option for long-term financial planners to invest their money in business shares. So an individual can purchase a share in a business to give them a small percentage ownership of the business. So let's say I really like this new cafe across the street. I think it's a great business, love the business, I want that business to succeed, and I think they're going to do very well. What I can do is go up to the business and say, I'd like to purchase a share. I'd like to invest in your business. And they will give me just a very small percentage of that business. So let's say I spend $1,000 to buy 1% of that cafe. This investment can be sold in the future at a higher price if the business becomes more valuable. So if I spend $1,000 for 1% of the cafe by investing this share, maybe 10 years from now when that cafe is super, super big and famous and rich, maybe 1% of the cafe is now worth $5,000. So my investment, my share, is now worth more money and I can sell it for a profit. If you're having trouble thinking of or understanding what these shares are and what investments are, you're not alone, because I struggle with it as well. But a good example, a good metaphor I use is a house. So think of a share as a brick in a house. So the business is this big house. The owner of the business owns the house, obviously. But if they want to expand, if they want a second story on their house, so they want a new garage or a big pool in the backyard, if they want to expand their business and they can't afford to do it themselves, they will sell a very small part of that house. They will sell a little brick of that house to other people. So they sell shares to people like Mr. Tapley. So maybe that cafe I mentioned wants to put in a new room, a new dining room. but they can't afford to do it themselves. So they say, okay, I am the owner of this business, but I'm going to give up 1% of the business to Mr. Tapley if he gives me $1,000. The business can then use that money to expand, and with more and more investors, more and more people queuing up saying, yeah, I want to invest in this business, I think it's a great business and they're going to do well, the business becomes more valuable, it becomes more profitable, and now all of a sudden that brick I purchased for $1,000 is worth $5,000. It's much more valuable. So investors can share off their profits by selling their shares at a higher price than what they paid for it. So, well done getting to the end of this. For your double periods, so these questions again you'll be completing across 2 periods, so don't stress. You'll be completing the following activities and questions in your digital notebook, and I'll show you where that chapter is. I'll go through the questions with you in a moment. Some of you may wish to stop the video at this point, take a deep breath, and then come back to this in your next period, the second half of the double. Or some of you might want to do, for example, these 3 questions this period, and then next period, the second half of your double, you come back, quickly go through the slides again so you can remind yourself what we're looking at and complete the second exercise. It's entirely up to you, and if you have any questions, please let me know. So, in chapter 21.3, exercise 1, we're looking at questions 1, 5, and 6. So if I go to chapter 21, remember it's 21, not 20, you'll see it's long-term personal financial goals. How very appropriate. They talk about superannuation, they talk about the pension, retirement, they talk about, how do I buy a house, a loan, obviously, a mortgage loan, that's just a loan that's specific for a house. So a loan is still a mortgage loan, but a mortgage loan is just one that they use specifically for a house. Anyway. Talk about shares and investments. Some of the information in this section here is a bit complex. So if you're reading through this and you don't understand it at all, don't stress, because some of this information isn't going to be used for the CAT. It's not going to be part of our curriculum. And you'll see that I've skipped questions that talk about things like the ASX or dividends, etc. So don't freak out. But if you have questions about it, please let me know. So question 1 of exercise 1. Remember, we are completing 1, 5, and 6. Question 1. What is the legal retirement age when you eventually retire? So that age that most people retire, that age where they have access to a pension. So if I retire when I am 28, I'm not going to be able to get that money from the government, because the government's like, no, you're young, go get another job. So what is the legal retirement age? Question, I've already forgotten, 4. What is superannuation? What is super? Explain how super works to provide a person with money for retirement. So how does super help people prepare for the long-term financial goal? How do they help people prepare for retirement? Question, remind me, Mr. Tapley. Oh, whoops. Sorry, guys. Question 5. What is a mortgage loan? What would happen if a person was unable to keep up payments on a mortgage loan? So again, we mentioned loans in the slides, and I just very briefly touched on what a mortgage loan is. You just need to scroll up the textbook and look at what a mortgage loan is. Question 6. Explain one benefit and one risk of owning shares. So that's kind of linking back to the positives and the negatives, the opportunity cost. So one benefit of owning shares might be that, well, if my business does well that I've invested in, like that cafe I mentioned in the example, my share is going to be more valuable, I can make a nice profit. But what might be one risk of putting your money into a business? So that's question 6. And then for exercise 2, chapter 21.3, exercise 2, you're completing question 1 and question 4. So question 1, answer the following questions. What are you buying when you buy shares? So that's kind of asking for the definition of a share. What is a share? When I say I'm buying a share, what am I buying? Question 1B. What would be the situation if you owned 100% of these shares in a company? So think back to that example I mentioned with the house and the bricks. What would happen if I owned 100% of those bricks? What would happen if I owned all the shares of a business? What does that make me? And then question, I'm going to double check these questions again so I don't get it wrong. Question 4, there we go. As a Year 7 student, the concept of retirement will hopefully seem a long way off. Analyze this statement that I had you guys think about earlier. You are never too young to start saving. So what question 4 is asking for there is, what does this mean to you personally? So there's no wrong answer. I'm asking for your opinion. When I say you are never too young to start saving, what do you think of? What does that mean to you? Do you start thinking about your long-term financial goals? Do you disagree with that statement? Do you agree? What does it all mean? If you had to explain that statement to someone else, to another Year 7, what would you say? So those are the questions you're completing, lesson activities for this double period, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can send me an email, leave a comment to Google Classroom. Again, I'll make it very clear in the lesson instructions on Compass that this is to be completed across a double period. I've had a few people ask me when we'll be completing the CAT and the DEV for this topic. And that'll be coming up probably next week or the week after. We're almost at the end of economics, for those of you who are pretty sick of it. So in week 8 or week 9, we'll be completing the CAT. And then after economics, we'll be studying history, which is my favorite topic personally. So hopefully you guys have a bit of fun with that. And yeah, best of luck, guys. Hope you're well. Cheers.